Hello and welcome to Tag Tuesday, in which I present the opera composer's book tag, the lowbrow Ignoramus version. This tag was created by Juan of Just One Reader. A link to his original video is provided in the show notes below. I am not an opera buff, and my knowledge of opera is limited to a liking for the music of Puccini. So do not expect any great musical knowledge or singing of arias from the great operas. What did I hear you say? Thank goodness. Go listen to Juan if you want opera singing. I intend to concentrate on books, of which I know a thing or two. So, to the questions. Question 1, BIZET. There is an excitement in his melodies, especially in Carmen. So choose a book or author that is utterly exciting. For this prompt I've chosen The Hound of the Baskervilles by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Mr. Holmes, they were the footprints of a gigantic hound. The terrible spectacle of the beast, the fog of the moor, the discovery of a body. This classic horror story pits detective against dog, rationalism against the supernatural, good against evil. When Sir Charles Baskerville is found dead on the wild Devon moorland with the footprints of a giant hound nearby, the blame is placed on a family curse. It is left to Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson to solve the mystery of the legend of the Phantom Hound before Sir Charles's heir comes to an equally gruesome end. The Hound of the Baskervilles gripped readers when it was first serialised and has continued to hold its place in the popular imagination. Question 2, VERDI. He represents operas such as La Traviata that are popular and beloved. So choose a book or author that is very popular or famous and that you actually love. There are many books that I like, quite a few that I admire, and a limited number that I think are great. But on reflection, the book that I think I actually love above all others is David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. In David Copperfield you have the Micawbers, Peggotty and Barkis, Traddles, Betsy Trotwood and Mr. Dick, Uriah Heep and his mother, all the products of Dickens' exultant imagination. Let me quote W. Somerset Maugham from his book 10 Novels and Their Authors. David Copperfield is filled with characters of the most astonishing variety, vividness and originality. They have so much vigour, they are so consistent, they are presented with so much verisimilitude and with so much conviction that while you read you cannot but believe in them. They may not be real, but they are very much alive. And I think that is why I love David Copperfield above all other novels. Question 3, Puccini. An opera composer who is exuberant with romantic melodies, who produces waves of beautiful melodies that envelop you. So choose a book or author that is romantic, exuberant, enveloping. For this prompt I've chosen A Son of the People, a romance of the Hungarian plains by Baroness Emma Orczy. Kemeny Andras has everything. He is tall and handsome, has a vast inheritance left to him by his father, and holds the respect and admiration of the entire village. There is nothing he does not have, except for one thing: the heart of Ilonka, the beautiful daughter of the noble Lord BIZET. But Andras is a peasant, and this humble station makes him unworthy for the consideration of such a match. He is even below notice, that is until one eventful disastrous night. A Son of the People by Baroness Orczy is a romance of the plains, set in her native Hungary. Orsi uses scenes from her own childhood when writing, describing the house in Tarn Ors in which she was born and the life of the territorial magnates of Hungary with which she had been familiar. Orsi claims in her autobiography that the love story woven into the plot actually occurred in the next village to Tarn Ors, and the daughter of the territorial noble who owned that property did actually marry a highly educated and rich peasant who had fallen desperately in love with her. Her father had been brought to financial disaster through the same agrarian troubles that had nearly ruined Orsi's own father, and he gave a reluctant consent to the incongruous marriage. This story of pride, passion, wealth and class set in Hungary is told with tremendous verve and passion, and is romantic, exuberant and enveloping. Question 4. Rossini. He is all about rhythm. There is an undercurrent of vibrancy in his music. It is all about the dynamics, the movement, the rhythm. So choose a book in which rhythm plays an important role. For this prompt I've chosen Lark Rise to Candleford by Flora Thompson, which is a semi-autobiographical trilogy comprised of Lark Rise, Over to Candleford and Candleford Green. The rhythms of the seasons are a notable feature of this pastoral memoir. Lark Rise to Candleford is a heart-warming portrayal of country life at the close of the 19th century. This story of three closely related Oxfordshire communities, a hamlet, the nearby village, and a small market town, is based on the author's experiences during childhood and youth. It chronicles May Day celebrations and forgotten children's games, the daily lives of farm workers and craftsmen, friends and relations, all painted with a gaiety and freshness of observation that makes this trilogy an evocative and sensitive memorial of Victorian rural England. The stories are told in the third person by Laura, a version of the author's childhood self, who observes events directly, while the adult author is also present as a second narrator, commenting and reflecting on past events. The counterpoint between these dual viewpoints is part of what gives Lark Rise its unique voice. Because Thompson wrote her account some 40 years after the events she describes, she was able to identify the period as a pivotal point in rural history, the time when the quiet, close-knit and peaceful rural culture governed by the seasons began a transformation through agricultural mechanization, better communications and urban expansion into the homogenized society of today. The transformation is not explicitly described. It appears as an allegory, for example in Laura's first visit to Candleford without her parents, the journey from her tiny village to the sophisticated town, representing the temporal changes that would affect her whole community. Although the works are autobiographical, Thompson distances herself from her childhood persona by telling the tale in the third person. She appears in the book as Laura Timmins, rather than her real maiden name of Flora Timms. This device allows Thompson to comment on the action using the voice of Laura as the child she was and as the adult narrator without imposing herself into the work. The book describes village life through the seasons of the year, the first day of harvest for Lark Rise and the first hunt meet of the new year, a winter's day in January for Candleford. The reader is thus able to recognise the value of a way of life close to the land and countryside that they could never know for themselves. The reader can recognise the common humanity linking the 19th century villagers and the contemporary reader. Question 5. Wagner. He is difficult to listen to, and thus he is an acquired taste, not for everybody. For this prompt I've chosen The Portrait of a Lady by Henry James. I happen to think that this is an excellent novel by a master craftsman, but I have to admit that Henry James's style is not for everyone. Sean, the book maniac, made an interesting observation when he said that Henry James chewed more than he bit off. However, in The Portrait of a Lady, published in 1881, James concluded the first phase of his career with the novel that remains his most popular piece of long fiction. The story is of a spirited young American woman, Isabel Archer, who confronts her destiny and finds it overwhelming. She inherits a large amount of money and subsequently becomes the victim of Machiavellian scheming by two American expatriates. The narrative is set mainly in Europe, especially in England and Italy. Generally regarded as the masterpiece of his early phase, The Portrait of a Lady is described as a psychological novel exploring the minds of his characters, and almost a work of social science exploring the differences between Europeans and Americans, the old and the new worlds. His later works were increasingly experimental. In describing the internal states of mind and social dynamics of his characters, James often made use of a style in which ambiguous or contradictory motives and impressions were overlaid or juxtaposed in the discussion of a character's psyche. For their unique ambiguity, as well as for other aspects of their composition, his late works have been compared to Impressionist painting. But for a more accessible novel from his earlier phase, I can heartily recommend The Portrait of a Lady. Question 6. Mozart. Virtuosic, virtuosic, virtuosic. For this prompt, I could have chosen any number of great novelists, but I think that one author and one book stands supreme as a virtuosic performance, and that book is Middlemarch by George Eliot. Middlemarch, a study of provincial life by George Eliot, aka Mary Ann Evans, was first published in 8 instalments in 1871-1872. The novel is set in the fictitious Midlands town of Middlemarch during 1829 to 1832 and follows several distinct intersecting stories with a large cast of characters. Issues include the status of women, the nature of marriage, idealism, self-interest, religion, hypocrisy, political reform, and education. Despite comic elements, Middlemarch is a work of realism encompassing historical events: the 1832 Reform Act, the beginnings of the railways, and the death of King George IV, and succession of his brother the Duke of Clarence as King William IV. It incorporates contemporary medicine and examines the reactionary views of a settled community facing unwelcome change. Eliot began writing the two pieces that would form Middlemarch in the years 1869 to 1870 and completed the novel in 1871. Although initial reviews were mixed, it is now seen widely as her best work and one of the great novels of the English language. In the process of composition, Eliot compiled a notebook of hundreds of literary quotations, including excerpts from poets, historians, playwrights, philosophers, and critics in 8 different languages. George Eliot was undoubtedly a woman of superior intellect, and in Middlemarch she displays that powerful intellect to tell a compelling and involving story that amounts to a virtuosic performance. Middlemarch centres on the lives of the residents of Middlemarch, a fictitious Midlands town in England from 1829 onwards, the years preceding the 1832 Reform Act. The narrative is variably considered to consist of 3 or 4 plots of unequal emphasis: the life of Dorothea Brooke, the career of Tertius Lydgate, the courtship of Mary Garth by Fred Vincy, and the disgrace of Nicholas Bulstrode. The 2 main plots are those of Dorothea and Lydgate. I highly recommend this superb and brilliant novel. Question 7. Donizetti. Charming, warm, and melodic. Choose a book or author whose prose is charming, melodic, tickles your ear. For this prompt, I could quite easily have followed Juan in choosing P.G. Wodehouse, but instead I've chosen James Herriot and his 8 volumes of memoirs encapsulated in the phrase "all creatures great and small." They are charming, heartwarming, and laugh out loud funny. Fresh out of veterinary college and shoulder deep in an uncooperative cow, James Herriot's first job is not panning out exactly as expected. To a Glaswegian like James, 1930s Yorkshire appears to offer an idyllic pocket of rural life in a rapidly changing world. But even life in the sleepy village of Derby has its challenges. On the one hand, there are his new colleagues, Siegfried and Tristan Farnan, two brothers who attract a constant stream of local girls to whom James is strangely invisible. On the other hand, he must contend with herds of semi-feral cattle, gruff farmers with incomprehensible accents, and an overweight Pekingese called Tricky Woo. Heartbreaking and hilarious in equal measure, Herriot's 8 memoirs are books for all those who find laughter and joy in animals and who know and understand the magic and beauty of Britain's wild places. But there is more to James Herriot's memoirs than just animals. His acute observation of the people he works with and the people he meets are told with penetrating wit, warmth and charm. For example, he reveals the prickly character of Siegfried Farnan, based on White's real-life partner Donald Sinclair, who is shown to be capricious, cantankerous, whimsical, arbitrary, unreasonable, unpredictable, ill-tempered, extravagant, effusive, contradictory, etc. Yet in the midst of all that, the most loyal and caring of friends. James Herriot's 8 memoirs are books to cherish and to be read again and again. Question 8. Leoncavallo. He wrote music that was potent, strong and bold. So choose a book that is a potent, bold book. For this prompt I've chosen The Night of the Hunter by Davis Grubb, the best-selling National Book Award finalist novel that inspired Charles Laughton's expressionist horror classic starring Robert Mitchum and Shelley Winters. 2 young children, Pearl and John Harper, are being raised alone by their mother in Cresaps Landing, Ohio. Their father, Ben, has just been executed for killing 2 men in the course of an armed robbery. Ben never told anyone where he hid the $10,000 he stole. Not his widow Willa, not his lawyer, nor his cellmate Henry Preacher Powell. But Preacher, with his long history of charming his way into widows' hearts and lives, has an inkling that Ben's money could be within his reach. As soon as he is free, Preacher makes his way up the river to visit the Harper family, where, he hopes, a little child shall lead him to the fortune that he seeks. Although he pretends to be a righteous preacher, darkness lurks in his heart. A knife lies in his pocket, and he wants that money. The 2 young children are terrified by this malevolent presence in their lives, and as they go on the run, they are pursued by this dark hunter to a terrifying end. The book is brilliantly told, and the story is faithfully produced in Charles Laughton's movie masterpiece. I highly recommend both book and film. And now, here's a quick recap of all the books, and I'll be back on Thursday with my November month-end wrap-up and my December TBR.